To Europe for our next story. Conservative Karol Nawrocki has emerged victorious in Poland's presidential runoff election, according to the final official results. Nawrocki, a historian and candidate backed by the right-wing Law and Justice Party, secured 50.89% of the vote, edging out Liberal Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski, who received 49.11%. Nawrocki's campaign focused on prioritising Polish economic and social interests, expressing caution over Ukraine's NATO membership due to security risks with Russia. His victory signals a potential shift towards nationalist policies and a stronger alignment with like-minded leaders in Central Europe. Nawrocki promised to defend Poland's sovereignty and continue supporting national defence while maintaining a balanced foreign policy. This election outcome will have significant implications for Poland's future, both domestically and on the international stage. Let's now turn to the Indo-Pacific once again, where after months of political unrest, South Korea is set to elect a new president this week, following the dramatic ouster of conservative leader Yoon Suk-yeol, who was removed from office after his controversial imposition of martial law last December. According to reports, Liberal frontrunner Lee Jae-myung is widely expected to win this presidential snap election as voters react strongly to the fallout from Yoon's short-lived decree. His main rival, Conservative candidate Kim Moon-soo, is fighting an uphill battle. Analysts say his reluctance to criticise Yoon openly has hurt his chances of closing the gap with Lee. On the campaign trail, Kim Moon-soo, a former Labour minister under Yoon, is drawing crowds but continues to trail in all major polls. He represents the Conservative People Power Party and has recently seen a surge in support after he defied a call for cabinet members to publicly apologise for the martial law decree. Lee, a 60-year-old Democratic Party veteran, led the charge to remove Yoon from power and is now hoping to ride that momentum all the way to the presidency. Now let's move north to North Korea, where it defended its military cooperation with Russia, claiming the partnership is intended to ensure peace and stability in Europe and Asia. In recent years, the two countries have deepened their military ties, with Pyongyang providing arms and troops to support Moscow's war efforts in Ukraine. South Korean lawmaker Lee Sung-kwon, citing intelligence sources, reported that around 600 North Korean soldiers have been killed and thousands more injured while fighting for Russia. Last week, a multilateral sanctions monitoring group included South Korea, the US and Japan condemned these military ties as unlawful. In response, Pyongyang said its cooperation with Moscow aims to protect the sovereignty and security interests of both nations while promoting peace and stability in the Eurasian region. A foreign ministry official described the relationship as the cream of the inner-state relations and said both countries seek to establish a multipolar world based on respect for sovereignty, equality and justice. The multilateral sanctions monitoring team formed last October to track violations of UN sanctions on North Korea reported that in 2024, Russian shipped cargoes carried up to 9 million rounds of artillery and rocket ammunition from North Korea to Russia. In April, North Korea confirmed for the first time that it had deployed troops to Russia to support the war in Ukraine. We move on now. Germany's top defence chief has warned that Russia may attack NATO within the next 4 years. General Carsten Breuer told the BBC that Russia is rapidly building up its military. He said Russia produces around 1,500 main battle tanks a year. Many of these could be used in an attack on NATO's Baltic states by 2029 or even sooner. Breuer spoke at the Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, where he described the threat as the most serious he has seen in 40 years. The German general also pointed to Russia's large stockpiles of artillery ammunition. He urged NATO members to strengthen their forces and boost defence budgets. Brea also stressed the need for readiness to defend a possible attack at any time. Despite some disagreements within NATO, Brea said the alliance remains united. He highlighted the vulnerability of the Baltic region, however, especially the Suwałki Gap. NATO's leaders will discuss defence plans at a summit in The Hague very soon. Now let's move over to the United Kingdom, where it has announced plans to construct up to 12 new nuclear-powered attack submarines set to replace the current fleet from the late 2030s onwards. Alongside this, Sir Keir Starmer will invest £15 billion in its nuclear warhead programme to maintain the country's continuous at-sea deterrent. The review also includes funding for munitions factories, long-range weapons and a new cyber and electromagnetic command. Defence Secretary John Healey highlighted the need to face rising threats, particularly from Russia, while pledging to rebuild the army to 73,000 full-time soldiers in the next Parliament. The investment is expected to support thousands of jobs and apprenticeships, signalling a significant commitment to strengthening UK defence capabilities for decades to come. Now let's move over to the African continent, where the death toll from the devastating floods in the Nigerian town of Mokwa has now risen to over 200. Officials confirm that around 500 people are still missing as search operations continue in Niger State. Local authorities say rescue efforts have been halted, with little hope of finding survivors. The floods triggered by torrential rains swept through the communities of Tifin Maza and Gawun Haukusa. Local leaders say this is the worst flooding in the region in 6 decades. In a bid to prevent outbreaks of disease, officials plan to exhume bodies swept underground by the floodwater. The Nigerian Red Cross has described the disaster as causing a significant loss of life and widespread distress. Flooding is a common threat during Nigeria's rainy season. The country has faced deadly floods in recent years, including a 2024 and 2022 flood, when over 600 lives were lost and more than 1 million people were displaced. We stay in the country of Nigeria once again, where tragedy struck in the north as 22 people, including athletes, coaches and officials, were killed in a road accident while returning from the National Sports Festival. The crash was described as a lone accident likely caused by fatigue and excessive speed. Many victims were young, according to Kano State authorities. The governor of Kano State, Abba Kasif Yusuf, expressed deep sorrow and announced Monday as a day of mourning. The fatal accident occurred shortly after the closing ceremony of the 22nd National Sports Festival in Ogun State. Now let's move to North America, where Mexico held its first ever judicial elections, marking a historic but controversial moment for the country's justice system. Voters were asked to select around 880 federal judges, including Supreme Court justices, in a reform aimed at transforming the judiciary. However, turnout was low, with only around 13% of eligible voters casting their ballots, according to the National Electoral Institute. Experts warn that low participation raises questions about the election's legitimacy, with many voters expressing confusion and disillusionment, struggling to understand the new voting process and skeptical due to decades of corruption. Despite criticism, President Claudia Sheinbaum hailed the elections as a complete success, noting that nearly 13 million Mexicans participated in choosing judges. Critics fear this reform could politicize the courts and make them vulnerable to criminal influence. The next round of judicial elections is scheduled for 2027, continuing this unprecedented experiment in Mexico's judicial system. We stay in Mexico once again, where a fire at a drug rehabilitation center in Guadalajara, Mexico, has claimed the lives of 12 people, with several others injured. Authorities say the blaze broke out in the town of San Jose Iturbide, and investigations are ongoing. Mexican officials expressed condolences to the families affected and pledged support to cover funeral expenses. Reports indicate that victims were locked inside the facility at the time of the fire. Guanajuato is plagued by turf wars between drug cartels and has witnessed numerous attacks on rehabs. Experts suggest that these centers have become targets as cartels attempt to forcibly recruit or punish those resisting their control. We move on once again. Workers' rights are in global decline, according to a new report from the International Trade Union Confederation. The annual index says rights to strike and bargain collectively are being ignored or undermined in over 80% of countries. The report found Europe and the Americas experienced their worst results since the survey began in 2014. In France, nearly 40% of collective agreements were imposed without union input, and over 1,000 union leaders are facing charges for protests against pension reforms. Only 7 countries received top marks for respecting workers' rights, down from 18 10 years ago. Trade unionists were killed in 5 countries, including Colombia and South Africa, and Nigeria entered the 10 worst countries for the first time. The ITUC warned that if the decline continues, no country may hold the top rating in the next 10 years. Well, that's all we have time